if somebody comes in late and misses the first part. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're dialing in from around the world, or maybe I should say where you are joining us from, since I don't think anybody dials in anymore. My name is Edmund Dunn, and I am presenting the No API, No Problem, a recipe for connecting to external databases today. I put right here the URL to my GitHub repository where I put all the code for this. So feel free, I'll give you a minute here to write it down or type it out to go get the code and look at it. There's also in the session, I put the latest copy of the slides so that you can go get those there too if you want to follow along using the slides. All right, so as I said, my name is Edmund Dunn. I'm a full stack developer working for the Atten Design Group out of Denver, Colorado. Atten was founded 20 years ago with a mission to make positive change in the world. But the idea that some stories just need to be heard. And we've worked on what's going on? Sorry, my Zoom just got weird. All right, I think we're good. We've worked on with a number of humanitarian, higher education, and publishing organizations doing work that matters. We have a team of roughly 24 strategists, designers, developers, and project managers. And we're headquartered in Denver, Colorado, but have employees all over the world. I am in Hagerstown, Maryland, which is the western part of Maryland. We have people that work from everywhere from France to South Korea. We are very big on collaboration, and even though we are semi-distributed, now fully distributed, we have a regular company summits to bring everybody together and share ideas. So I know this part is going to be a little difficult since people can't really show hands, but feel free to chime in the chat. Have you ever had access to access external data, either via an API, direct database connection, or another way? And if so, how?
Looks like Mega Chris we had one question, one hand raised.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was in the presentation. Raise your hand if you had done that.
Okay, fair enough.
Feeds module, maybe. Maybe you already know that.
Yep. I've used feeds, I've used Migrate, and now I've set up a direct connection, which I'll get into. So our challenge. We had a client come to us for a project, and we had to access data from a very large database that encompassed many varied areas. And we only needed data from a very small part of it. We had to use that data to create and update nodes. For this project, we were doing, it was property listings. For my example code, I just used article, since it's kind of a very generic content type. And we needed to be able to automate the process. Automating it was very important so that there could be a lot of data being moved in the background, and we would have less to worry about for the content managers and administrators, since a lot of them were not technical people. The discovery. So during the discovery, we asked some questions. We asked about accessing the database. We asked what kind of database is it? Is it a SQL database? Is it a NoSQL database? All these were questions we had to ask and kind of work through. And there was a lot of back and forth with the client trying to figure out what was going to best fit the needs of the new site and what was going to best fit their needs, because that database was entirely within the client's domain as far as administering it, adding fields to it, taking fields away, restructuring it, etc. And the first most obvious solution or possible solution that came to us was using a RESTful API. In this case, there was one available, but it was kind of limited in how much data we could get and how we could get it. And it was deemed that that might not be the best answer because it was going to require a lot of work on the client's end to restructure and make the data that we needed available. We then asked if we could connect directly to the database, which there were security concerns about directly accessing the database itself where all of this was stored. And we also asked if there was another way of moving this data, i.e. feeds. And again, that was going to be problematic because of the amount of work that was going to be incumbent on the client to get things set up. And so we came back to the direct connection. In our case, they had the web database, which was just a kind of straightforward MySQL database, nothing very well laid out, kind of not overly complicated. And it was already outside of the firewall because it was running their existing website. And so with a few tweaks on their end, we decided to go ahead and use their existing web database because all of the code was in place to be moving data from the larger database into their web database. So they weren't going to have to change any of that. And we could then access it for what we needed for our site in read-only mode because all we're doing is getting that information from the site and using it to create and update nodes. There was never any mention or idea that we were going to have to write data back to it. There was no need. And so that again simplified things for the client security protocols. So, like I said, we decided on a direct connection. We then decided on a cron job to run the service regularly. And I will, for those of you that aren't familiar with what a cron job is, I'll get into that a little bit more later when I discuss the cron job specifically. And then we set up a service to query the external database. That service is called by the cron job. And again, for those of you that aren't familiar what services are inside of Drupal, I will get more into that later as I explain how we define the service and how we set it up. So the default connection, those of you that have worked with Drupal in the past and had to set it up will probably be familiar with this. This is your default database connection and how it is defined. It is boilerplate and it is never really changes. One thing you will notice is that the keys are defined as default, and that is one first key of default is what changes when you create your external connection. Now, a note is that for those of you that have used Migrate or plan on using Migrate in the future, this is how you define the database connection for the database you're migrating from. Syntax is identical. So you notice the first key of external database. In this case, I made it generic. You can call it something more semantic that fits for your particular project or particular client. We then created a custom module. Now, I usually use Drupal console to kind of do the boilerplate layout for a custom module when I get started with it. It will ask you a few questions and then lay out these two files. It will lay out some others too, depending on if you need templates or not, if you need controllers or not, what have you. So what it ended up looking like was this. We added a .services.yaml file, and then under the source directory, we define, we have our interface and our service files. And I will get into more detail on what those are and why they're necessary as we get a little bit further into this. There is extensive documentation on Drupal.org about the layout of custom modules and what directories go where and what files go in those directories. That is important because it's how Drupal will find the files that it needs to run whatever you're trying to run inside your custom module. So inside the .module file, we had one real function that we're calling here, and that was hook cron. And this sets up and engages with Drupal's built-in cron functionality and calls the service. Now we could have taken all of the code that we put inside the service and put it inside of this cron function, but then it wouldn't have been really reusable, and it would have been much more difficult to maintain and not at all reusable. And so we wanted to make it so that it could be reusable if necessary. And so this is how we decided to do that. Now, for those of you that don't know what cron is used to perform periodic actions. So for this client, we were calling the service every 5 minutes. Some cron jobs will call every hour, some every week. They're commonly used for things like sending emails or backing up information, whether it's a database or part of a database. They can be used to run scripts that do various maintenance tasks inside of your site. So things that go in and clean out unnecessary cache information or old cache information, things like that. We also implemented or used a module called Ultimate Cron, which gives you a lot more control over cron than the core module of Automated Cron. Automated Cron only lets you run as often as once every hour, and our client wanted to run more often. And because the editors, administrators, and content managers for the site are non-technical, we wanted to have something in the UI. And so we chose not to set up a cron job on the server itself using cron tab, but instead use Ultimate Cron, which gives us a great deal of control over individual cron jobs. Next, the services. So this is the services.yaml file, and we use this, or Drupal, I should say, uses this to both to define services and also to set them up to be injected into your class. The first two services we start off with is the logger, and that one is pretty self-explanatory. We use it to record information in the logs about the jobs that we're running, giving updates, saying, giving errors, telling how many nodes were updated, how many were created. I'll get into what we did specifically, but I have found it to be a very, very useful tool, just because sometimes it's hard to find where things went wrong, and if you can start logging things, it generally speeds up finding where the problem is. We also define our external database service here, and this is basically setting up the connection to our external database and making it so it can be called inside our service. This is not the only way to do it. You can also set and unset your database connections inside your code. That is a little clunky, in my opinion. This makes it a lot smoother, so you never have to worry about if for some reason that connection doesn't get set back to default, that you end up with a bunch of information in the wrong database, or you end up with a database that has been corrupted with extra information. For TSR4, which is the kind of the coding guidelines that Drupal uses, and Drupal, the Drupal organization really prefer that we follow their coding standards, and we do that for a number of reasons. It makes it easier for other developers to read your code if they're familiar with that. They know how things are defined, they know what to expect, and they know how things are laid out, and it just makes it a lot easier. There is the use of separate interface definitions, which is what this is. Is strongly encouraged because it allows more flexibility in extending the code later. So as you can see right here, we only have one function, but as we get inside the service file, there are actually 3 functions inside of there, but only one of them needs to be called. And only one of them needs to be public, and so that is defined here. The next thing we did is we added our update, which function, which we saw in the previous slide, to our services, and this is where we actually add the update service. And the class, of course, is self-explanatory. That just points to our file, or our class, and hence our file. And we also pass in arguments, and these arguments are important because we are passing other services in to the constructor of our class. And in this case, we define 2 of those services, the logger and the external database, which are the first 2 we pass in. We're also passing in entity type manager, which allows us to access and update or create our nodes. State, which we use to check the last time the cron job was ran, and then of course date time, which allows us to get the request time, which we use for comparison. And you'll see that as we get further into it. If you don't define the services in this arguments and you have them in your constructor, you'll start getting errors because it will say, we were expecting 5, but you only have 4, or vice versa. And so it's important that you make sure you include everything in this arguments in your services.yaml file. So for now, I'm going to jump into the service file itself. So this is the service file, and this one, it's a pretty lengthy file. The code snippets I included previously, that was all that was in the file, very limited amount of code. This one, there's a little bit more. And for those of you who aren't familiar with a normal layout of a class, we define our namespace. We also define our use statements, and this is where we're bringing in the other classes and interfaces that we're going to be using. And then we start our class as an external database update service, which is implementing our interface. We have our constants, and then down here is our construct function. And inside the constructor, you can see here, this is where we're connecting to those arguments that were passed in from the services.yaml file. And so following in order, same order, and then we're bringing in our constants and telling what this is, so that we can use this inside of our class instead of having to go through extra hoops. And down here we get into our create. And with the dependency injection, for those of you that aren't very familiar with it, this is what allows us to finish the injection of our services using a container interface. And this is something that comes from Symfony, which is Drupal 8 is built on top of Symfony. And we can inject them and call them or instantiate them right here. So here is our update function. Now this is our one public function, and this is also in the interface. And this is what gets the ball rolling. And as you can see, I spoke about state earlier. Right here is where we're getting the time of our last cron job, and down below we are, and when we get down there, I'll show you where we set the time that it was run. So that way it can use that information for querying in the external database, just information that's newer than the last time it was run. So that way we're not bringing in everything in the database every time. And then we check, we run our first external query here, and that is a function that I defined down below, right here. And we're passing in the table, which is defined, and the reason we did that for our project, there was multiple tables that we needed to be able to access. In this case, there was just one. We also catching the time that it was last run, and the author ID. I don't think we actually ended up using that. So we get to the database connection. We set up our columns array, and then the first query that we run is actually to get the structure of the table that we're querying against. And this is where our first logger message is that if for some reason that query something goes wrong, it will log the fact that we were unable to get the structure for that table. And then we take the fields that are returned and we use them to build our columns array. And that we decided to do it that way just in case the structure of the table changes. If they add a column, then we can accommodate that. We then run our database, so it's actually returning our information, our query. And if that result is empty, again, we log it. If it's not, then we return it back up to our update function, and we cycle it through, or iterate through it using our for each. And we use the article ID is our unique column in our external database, and we also use that as a unique column within our Drupal database, so that way we can check to see if there are existing articles or if there are not. We then use that to run a query against our nodes using Entity Type Manager to see if there are any nodes with that article ID. If it's empty, so in other words, if there is no current article, we go ahead and we create a node, and it's just the bare bones basic parts that we need of that node to create it. And then we save it, and then we pass it, that node and the article, to our update article function. And that function is right here. In the update article function, we're catching our node and our article, both are objects, and since this is being used if it's new or if we're just updating, We check to see that the value, in this case in the body field, is the same as what's in the article. And if it's not, we set it to the new value. If it is, then we do nothing. We save our node, and if for something goes wrong with that saving, again, we're logging our error, and then we return the node object back to our update function. If that node is returned, then we add to our new count variable. If it's not returned, then we have another log message. Down here in our else statement, we leave out the create portion, and this is in the case where the article already exists, and we're just updating, we're just changing some information. And again, we run it through the update article function, and if the result is returned, in this case we add to our update count. If the result is not returned, we log an error. And down here, this is where we use the time service, and we're getting the request time. Now, one of the something to note is that even though we're setting this for every 5 minutes, that Drupal uses requests coming into the site to kick off cron jobs, and so getting a request time, that gets us the time that the cron job was started, and we are setting it. We are storing it in state, so that the next time the cron job runs, we can get it out and do our comparison. And here we log a notice that however many new articles and however many updated articles were processed. And that is the end of the service. And so, like I said, this runs every 5 minutes. It could run more often, just depending on what the client sees. For this project, this file was much more extensive. I tried to simplify it as much as possible. And on that note, I think I will open it up for questions. Go back to my slideshow. All right, are there any questions?
Just a quick question. I put the link in Slack. I think that's the correct, or not Slack. Sorry, you can tell what tools I use in the chat. Is that the correct link?
Yes.
Okay, good. Looks like we have a question from Mega Chris. I will unmute you. Oops, wait. It moved. Okay, there we are.
Why did you put the action log? I saw in the create function, I saw something like worded action. Do we understand the question?
No.
I saw something past action, something like an action log. If you go back to your file, in the create method, I saw locker factory get action.
Oh, to be perfectly honest, I don't know why. When I brought in the logger, I put that in for the, I got that from an example. It wasn't working correctly without that. And it took some digging around to find that I needed to add get action. And keep in mind, this was, we're using the PSR log. and not the Drupal log. And so I know that there have been some issues with Drupal log and getting it to work correctly.
And what's the reason for using the external log? What?
Because there had been some problems with the Drupal log. And so one of the workarounds was to use PSR log, which is a Symfony.
And the logs then get written to a text file or something.
No, the logs go right into Watchdog.
Into what?
Into Watchdog.
Watchdog.
Yeah. So they still show up when you go to your reports and look at your recent log messages. It still shows up inside of there.
Yeah, okay. It's probably out of scope to discuss the issues you had with general log service.
Yeah, we can talk later.
I would like to pitch in and say if there are any development topics that people in this session want to discuss, we still have 27 more minutes. So like we don't have to limit us to strictly the topic of the session if there are any relevant discussions.
Hello?
Well,
Hi, so I'm such a newcomer to all of this, I almost hesitate to ask questions at all. Are there some basic resources, I hope I'm not talking at the same time as anybody else, that newcomers to, looks like I got
My apologies. I clicked on the
it's
wrong
my fault.
button. No, it's my fault. I clicked on unmute all, which was not really what we wanted
Oh
to
no,
do.
I'm not even sure how to structure the question. It's basically just, is there a very ground level, I probably wandered into the wrong session, but just like very ground level, how to explain it to other people, way to unpack all of this. Sorry for the unclear question.
Edmund, you must unmute.
Oh.
Edmund, you must unmute.
okay.
Edmund.
Now I'm unmuted.
Okay,
I don't know how I got muted. There are a lot of very good tutorials, like if you're just getting started with Drupal, that will help you get started. A lot of people use Drupal that aren't even people that normally write a lot of code. Because there's a lot of modules that can be added in. And so I would suggest either looking at finding one of those tutorials, or you can look through the Drupal documentation. Drupal is pretty well documented. I find many answers to a lot of questions on Drupal.org, looking up whether it's for the correct way to do something, like in my case, how to set up a service, or just to figure out the right way to access some part of the functionality that's built into Drupal.
Gotcha. Okay, very good. Thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Well, is there anything more you want to share with us by any chance, Edmund?
I can't really think of anything. I enjoyed this, working on this project. There are, something I've found is that there are many right ways to do things. And in this case, just because of some of the constraints that we were dealing with, we chose to go this route. We probably could have used the core migrate functionality to do this, or feeds migrate to do this as well. It was just we had to make a choice and go with it. In answer to Nick's question, is any of the database switching happening through the UI? No, this is all being controlled back and forth by the code. All of the nodes that are being created, because they're being created by a cron job, will have anonymous as the author. And so, but it's all being done in the background. So you can see, the only thing you can see in the UI is the cron job, and that's just because of ultimate cron. But most people, with the exception of administrators, won't be looking at ultimate cron or any of the cron functionality. We used cron just because it would keep things in the background and we could set it up to run periodically. We look at the data. In this tape, we're populated nodes, which are, in this case, we define a node, a content type that we're populating with the data that we get from the external database. And so each node is we styled, and they can be viewed individually. And then we also set up views that would show an aggregate for a list of nodes that we created. All right, any other questions? Yeah. Ultimate Cron is just a contributed module that gives you much greater control over cron inside of Drupal, and everything is done through the UI. That control, I should say, is done through the UI. You still have to create your hook cron function in your .module file to define your cron job, but then you can set up how often it's called and how it's called inside of Ultimate Cron. Right.
Okay, I would like to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about my imports and migrations. I think this is a great example of a very custom import configuration. And with Drupal 8, Drupal 7 end of life, we are looking for better tools to import content into Drupal 9. And we're working on developing module that will combine best of feeds and migrate, so you can run more migrations through UI and limit custom configurations to the cases where they're really needed customized. So I would like to take opportunity to invite anybody who is in the session today to the sprint tomorrow. We will be showing how far model have gotten so far, and maybe there are people who can simply test the module at this point, and definitely all developers are cordially invited to join and contribute if you have time.
I will be there.
I should have introduced, say that Edmund is going to be leading the sprint, and Yuri is also on this call, and he is maintainer of feeds module and maintainer of feeds migrate module. So this is a great opportunity for those who are looking into optimizing migrations to look at additional stuff. Thank you.
And Irina, will you tell us a little bit about yourself and your role with this?
Yes, I will. Happy to do that. My name is Irina Zaks. I'm web developer and open source evangelist. For the last 3 years, I've been advocating for building better import tools for Drupal 8 and 9, and I had a long series of presentations on this topic. And a couple of years ago, it was almost 2 years ago, when feeds module and migrate module, and individually Yuri and some migrate folks joined their forces, and we hope that model that we're working on will save lots of headaches for everyone. Developers will not have to code same YAML files again and again, and they can concentrate on doing something really creative. And site builders will be able to import their content without having to go through development cycle every time when they want to switch from one data source to another data source. I will have more detailed presentation on this tomorrow at 1 in parallel with Sprint. Thank you.
Thank you, Irina. Edmund, can I get just a second and find out if you have any comments as a presenter, what you've learned presenting remotely? Any lessons learned today?
I actually think this has gone very well, given our limitations. I do kind of miss the opportunity to see people face to face and be able to sit down and talk with them and learn from them. But the presenting online, it is a little challenging just because of the reduced interaction. So people you can't take a quick poll of your audience and say, who has a lot of experience, who has a little experience, things like that, and depend on people raising hands, because it's just difficult. And so that, I think, was probably the most difficult part. The rest of it, I thought it's not really all that different from presenting live.
Okay, I think let's we'll end it here. There is a Zoom channel if everybody wants to hang out at lunchtime. It might be a lot of people and crowded, but at least you could wave to each other and say hi. I don't know how that'll work. This is a new world for us. We talked about doing conference rooms or something like that, but we'll see how this works. Anyways, please feel free to join us on Zoom at lunch, and feel free to bring your lunch. And anything else, Irina?
Thank you guys very much for coming. We're very excited to have that many people joining remotely from all places around the world. We had a very interesting question yesterday, like what times are shown on the sessions, and it was first time we realized that this is internet, and it's not like we're all sitting in the same building and have exactly the same time zone. So in this challenging times, it's great to feel that community is together.
Yes.
Thank you very much. And special thanks for those who are joining us from other time zones.
Yeah. Thanks, Yuri.
Thank you,
Yeah,
guys.
you're welcome.
See you at lunch. See you in the afternoon, in
Yep.
our afternoon. And I guess for folks in Europe on the East Coast, we will be providing nighttime entertainment sessions.
Oh, good.
Okay. Thanks. Bon appetit to those who are heading to lunch, and bon appetit for those who are heading to dinner.
My dinner is already finished.
Okay, then just happy time of the day.
Yeah, almost sleep time for me.
Where are you calling in from?
The Netherlands.
Nice.
Now, right, it is a bit early for sleep time, but It's nearly 8 o'clock in the evening.
Wow.
Awesome.
Hmm.
Well, there's some good things about this. People are more likely to participate remotely or from all over the world. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for joining us today. Hope to see you soon.